Good evening, everybody. We got a good show for you this evening. We're discussing, of course, as the title suggests, anarcho-tyranny. I am sure most of you already know the concept. Um, I don't know why you would be in my audience and have never heard of anarcho-tyranny before. But either way, we got brand new people on, brand new guests tonight. We were supposed to have a fourth, supposed to have James Kirkpatrick come on as well. However, I had not heard back from him as of this past Friday, even though he said this time was going to do well for him this evening. But it's possible he might come late. Hope he's doing all right. But either way, we still have two great guests for you. Marcel Gautreau, a personal friend of mine, and Tho Bishop. He is currently muted because he's dealing with something right now. But either way, we'll just go ahead and get started. Marcel, you've never been here. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Marcel Dumas-Gautreau. I'm a recent PhD grad from George Mason University. You can follow me on Twitter at Anarchy in Black. I'm sure this will all be in the show notes. And you should also subscribe to my Substack, which is just M and then my last name. I'm not going to bother. You can see it on the right there @substack.com.
All right, thank you. Great, finally having you on, Marcel. I know we've known each other for a couple years now, but like I'm only now just getting you on here. But
that is kind of surprising because I know Peyton's had me on his show.
Yeah. Anyway, Tho, are you currently incapacitated, or you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Well, take the silence as a no for now. But either way, Marcel. So anarcho-tyranny. You and I are the two men north of Richmond here. So we know. Yeah. No, there would have been three men north of Richmond here.
Rich men north of Richmond could be here.
Well, yeah. Either way, Marcel, I remember I was actually at a presentation, without going into any further details, but I was at a presentation that you gave on anarcho-tyranny. Of course, I'd heard of the concept before prior to going into it, but what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. You represented it very well. You really summed up basically what Sam Francis was trying to go for when we talk about the concept. Do you want to go ahead and explain to the audience, maybe who want a refresher or don't exactly know what the concept is? Because so far we've only just used the term anarcho-tyranny in this stream. We haven't actually gone ahead and laid it out. Yeah.
So anarcho-tyranny is best summarized by a scene from The Simpsons where Marge gets arrested and she asks Chief Wiggum, I thought you said that the law was powerless. And Chief Wiggum says it's powerless to help you, not powerless to hurt you. So anarcho-tyranny was what Sam Francis used to refer to the phenomenon of the fact that in the early 90s when he was writing and that crime wave, which would eventually lead to the Clinton crime bill, America was seeing at the same time no decrease in state capacity in terms of the state's ability to count votes, deliver mail, collect taxes, whatever. The government wasn't showing any signs of collapsing in the sense of being able to raise revenue for itself, while at the same time was seemingly unwilling or unable, and over time, San Francisco would strongly lead towards unwilling to actually protect productive people from criminal activity. And in some cases, seemed to be actively encouraging it. So you had, it's anarchy for them, tyranny for you.
So we're going to mostly be going on and discussing this part at a later time, like the second half of the show. But there is almost this sort of, I guess, from watching media or reading media, like you see it everything from like movies and comic books. It seems like anarcho-tyranny has actually become a very common literary motif or fictional motif over the course of the past maybe 20 to 30 years or so. Like you see it in, like, I don't know, A Clockwork Orange. You see it in A Clockwork Orange. It's part of the backstory for a lot of Robert Heinlein's his depictions of what pre-future Earth is. You see it like Starship Troopers. Basically, the government and Starship Troopers formed.
So, could you mean the book or the movie?
The book.
Okay, keep going.
The book. Well, the book, and yeah, but specifically in order to combat the anarcho-tyranny that was going on after the revolution. I think it was. It doesn't matter. But then you also see it, of course. You see it in a lot of Frank Miller's Batman comics. You see it in those Purge movies. Like, it just seems like it's a very, very common motif these days. And I'm not going to say that. I think it's very obvious that these creators didn't actually read Sam Francis. Like, I'd be very surprised if even a single one of them did. But still,
I have a feeling that Neil Blomkamp has read Sam Francis.
Who was he again?
District 9, Chappie, Elysium. What else has he done?
No, I know who you're talking about now, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So either way, does Tho have anything? Is he? He's probably still dealing.
No need to put him on the spot. I think.
Yeah, let's not put him on.
But I could see Frank Miller being before his neocon phase. I could see him being a Sam Francis fan.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
it's true. The '90s were a different time. Now that I think about it, the '90s were a very different time where certain people could just appear. You know what I mean? Like on Fox News, it just could never step within 50 feet of the building today. So it is entirely possible people were just reading the pages of it was Chronicles, right? Just reading Chronicle, and that was just totally okay. Now obviously totally unforgivable.
I just want to play real quick. I guess kind of to lead into this. One of my personal favorite depictions of anarcho-tyranny.
Ooh, yeah, that would.
Is imminent. Request advice.
With a firm tone of voice, demand maniac lie down with hands behind back.
Simon Phoenix, lie down with your hands behind your back.
What's this? 6 of you. Such nice, tidy uniforms. Oh, I'm so scared. What, you guys don't have sarcasm anymore?
Maniac has responded with a scornful remark.
Approach and repeat ultimatum in an even firmer tone of voice. Add the words, or else.
Simon Phoenix, lie down on the ground, or else.
Anti-graffiti activation program activated. Aborted. Human presence detected. Safety override code accepted.
Lucky number 7. Oh! Okay.
We're police officers. We're not trained to handle this kind of violence.
That scene is particularly relevant, not to spoil a movie that's got to be like 30 years old at this point.
Yeah.
But Simon Phoenix's presence in the society was in fact a government plot to target his political enemies.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Yes, it was the it was what was it? Dennis Leary's character, I know, was like the sort of like ANCAP kind of ish guy, but yeah, no, it is like in context, it makes a lot more sense. But I think an interesting point of discussion would be, so anarcho-tyranny, do you think that at least in its current form, assuming for the sake of the stream that it is in fact a real phenomenon, which I personally do believe it is.
Easily
do you think it has more to do with, I think really a matter of discussion comes down to, is it due to incompetence or is it out of pure malice and is it orchestrated? I think that is one of the most relevant discussions when it comes to anarcho-tyranny, because
I think maybe on the local level, it's a matter of incompetence. But as you move it to the federal level, it becomes a matter of policy. And I would almost say, the adjustment of the composition of law enforcement, such that they are incompetent in this pattern, right? Because you would think surely if it's just a matter of like, dumb Keystone cops, but there seem to be dumb Keystone cops everywhere, right? And they're all incompetent in the same way, in the same direction, predictably every single time. So even if, they're not thinking intentionally, I mean, they have to be thinking intentionally, man, I sure do love extracting revenue out of the people in my town with like 2 stoplights in it, right? So that's a conscious thought in their heads, but they're probably not thinking consciously like, man, I can't wait to like vindictively punish my neighbor for defending themselves against flagrant acts of violence. They're probably not thinking that. But at least on the federal level, it is definitely just clear policy.
Okay. So I think especially, I think one of the best good recent examples of this, well, actually, So let me backtrack. I forget. I think I was listening to an old Lotus Eaters video earlier where they were talking about everything. It was way back from 2020, completely nostalgic reasons. No, but it was they mentioned, and this is definitely something I also think is observable, that the crimes, like, what was the exact wording that they used? No, but it was more or less that, yes, no, I remember. It was, for instance, stores are going to even get mad, like, yeah, stores are going to try to prosecute, I don't know, a customer who doesn't have a mask on. Whereas if that building is burnt down by a rioter, like the government's not going to, I forget exactly how it was.
The government wouldn't let people sell the buildings or liquidate them in any way unless they paid for something they needed to pay for. Some grievous insult.
And on that note,
you're right. That was like years ago. I already kind of don't remember it.
That note, we have my usual co-host joining us a little late. How are you doing, Darth Kilhoun?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you just fine. We hear you just fine.
Okay. StreamYards is giving me issues with the mic, but it's good to join you guys. I'm joining you guys from actually outside while I'm picking apples off my tree.
Well, nice. Getting ready for harvest that's coming up soon. Can't believe it's already the end of the summer. But either way, Darth Kilhoun, I don't know how familiar you are with the writings of Sam Francis or the concept of Anarcho-tyranny. I've heard you discuss it before, but I don't know how much of this you heard leading up to you coming into the actual call. But do you have anything like you want to go ahead and say with regards to anything that you might have heard us say already, or?
I don't really have much to say on what's already been said. I have not read San Francis directly. I've more just kind of known of the theory of anarcho-tyranny through other means of learning it. So I'm not the most well informed, but I am semi-informed on the topic.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so we were just talking about how ways in which the government might enact policies that, by corollary, might feed into anarcho-tyranny, or it might help. Because we were just talking about COVID, for example, about how the government wouldn't let them. What was it exactly, Marcel, specifically?
Oh, it was businesses that it was people that had their business destroyed during the summer of love in 2020. And when they wanted to sell the buildings off or otherwise simply evacuate the buildings, and move to another town, move to a small town, right, where you try it there. The cities had demanded, I think, that they pay the next year of property taxes up front, even though they didn't plan on living there.
So, yeah. Do you think that would have been like a deliberate attempt by the government in order to do that?
Yeah. I mean, that was just one last kick in the pants on the way out.
Yeah. No, I think going back to COVID, though, what we really saw was one of the largest, if not, I mean, I don't know exactly per capita, but hands down, one of the largest sort of misallocations of capital in human history, or not reallocation, especially because you saw small businesses that were essentially, well, first of all, they weren't bailed out. The government didn't compensate these business owners that they ended up forcing to close, like, over the pandemic for anything, which is a whole lot of screwed up right there. But also giving these large companies like Walmart, for instance, unnecessary bailouts, corporate welfare. And now they're some of the only businesses that are dominating these once large, smaller towns. And then you saw the same thing again when the buildings were burned down in Minneapolis. A lot of the people who on those properties that were burned down, they're not small businesses anymore. And it almost makes you wonder if there is, and this isn't me to go into that whole like socialist conspiracy theory or anything, because you always hear socialists blaming everything on the corporations and stuff, which, to be fair, a lot of it is warranted. But either way, they're saying, oh no, we live in a corporate state. Like, we live in a corporate state, which to an extent is true. But like, how much of this do you think is economic? Any of you guys, like, how much of it is it just about the accumulation of raw power, or do you think they do have corporate interests in order, like, just on this front of the discussion?
When it comes to COVID, I tend to be just like a slightly out of step with most of the people in this orbit. And that my perspective is that, liberal elites are not really in the business of trying to destroy liberalism. And people kind of forget how it was in the very beginning of COVID, where it was like the right that was concerned about it, and it was Nancy Pelosi going out and telling you, like, if you're afraid of COVID, you're racist and you should go hug a Chinese person right now. And they really dragged their feet on. Yes.
Oh my God.
And they were all really dragging their feet on, like, closing the airports. I think even Trump tried to close the airports, and there was like a court injunction against him doing it. And then the restrictions really came all at once, and it really seemed as though they were just recommended by Anthony Fauci, right? But I'm not sure I would consider that to be anarcho-tyranny. Like, it's not really a strain on the state's capacity to, like, force businesses to close and then be able to actually bail out some. I think the stronger anarcho-tyrannical pattern, and it really shows how, people can actually take, like, a lot of tyranny if there's no hypocrisy in it. But some of the early COVID restrictions, so because the right was the first one clamoring for it, and at that time the right was really in favor of mask wearing, and they were against lockdowns. That was what the window was. And you saw the advent of social masking, social distancing, and a lot of people kind of liked it. I really remember that a lot of conservatives were like, wow, like the state, normally the state uses its power as just like an insulting exercise against my dignity and my people. But really it seemed, I kind of feel protected. Like, this is security theater, kind of like when I'm at the airport. And I feel safe in the same way. You go to Walmart and you got those stickers on the ground and everybody has to, walk in the things. And it's like, wow, we're really all in this together. You can start saying this. And, you're not allowed to make a fuss. And, this is really, this is something. Like, we're like in a real emergency. This is just like World War II. I'm like living in the great struggle for our times. And then what happened was, I wish I remember exactly whether it was finding out George Floyd had died, or I think the video had already come out. Either way, when the protests against George Floyd began, you saw a lot of conservatives like, you won't be able to do it this time, Democrats, because there's a public health emergency, so you can't go outside and start tearing things down. And you had all the medical establishment come out and say, like, actually, racism is a public health emergency, so, go out, burn, destroy, kill. And that was when you had, like Yosemite Sam conservatives pull their mask off and, like, throw it on the ground, firing their revolvers into the air, like, razzing, frazzing, right? Because that was when it meant that the state was going to be using the full force of itself to stop you from going to the gym, and at the same time to restrain you from defending yourself if somebody tried to burn down that same gym. That is where the anarcho-tyranny, I think, really comes in. And that was what really made the COVID response, what it is today. Like, I'm actually strong in the opinion that if there were no we call them George Floyd protests. If there were no George Floyd protests, there probably COVID wouldn't be the issue it is, because conservatives wouldn't be so reflexively against it, because it showed that it was so hypocritical and therefore so inherently political that they can't trust anything about it.
That makes, that does make sense.
And for those who just need one item of evidence, you may remember this at the time, there was a video of this Taiwanese woman who was calling the head of the World Health Organization and asking about all the countries and how they were doing. And she asked about Taiwan, and the guy was pretending not to know even what Taiwan was. But the reason that was important was because in Taiwan, they were wearing masks. And the liberals in America were like, oh, don't even bother wearing masks. And so they're trying to prove a point. Conservatives were using that video to prove a point that, like, masks work. And, South Korea and Taiwan or whatever, they know that masks work, but the Democrats just want you all to stay home. That was what the narrative was for that brief, like 2-3 week period.
So yeah, so back on the do you remember the Jacob Blake shooting also?
No.
This was the one in Kenosha. There was the guy who was trying to he was trying to kidnap his ex-girlfriend's children, and then the officer came, shot him in the back 9 times, paralyzed him. Whether or not you think that's excessive force is a completely different conversation, but either way, so he didn't end up dying either way. I think compared to George Floyd, I think where there is a lot more gray area in that you come to the Jacob Blake thing. It was a lot more.
Jacob Blake was in the middle of committing a crime of kidnapping children. I believe he was like going for a weapon. In principle, George Floyd was he was more than incapacitated. I mean, he was
yeah.
right. He was no threat to anyone but himself. Like we can all agree on that George Floyd was no threat to anybody.
Yes. Yeah, the autopsy demonstrates that much, but no, but either way, the Jacob Blake thing. So it's immediately they start that ends up inciting a riot too. And I think going back and taking this within the context of the summer 2020 riots in general, we got to a point where it's police shoots unarmed, or not even unarmed, police shoots black man. Therefore, that is cause of a riot, regardless of what the context were. And nobody was doing anything to try to set the record straight of this context. It is police shoots black man, very little like I don't know if you heard about the one, I think it was Philadelphia, where you had a homeless man, and you had a cop who was trying to, I think it was a robbery or something they were trying to prevent. And then when the guy turned on him and had a knife, the cop tried running away because he didn't want to be the next guy who would get in trouble for shooting a black guy, even though he was chasing after him. So this homeless gentleman beset him, and he had no choice but to turn back, and he shot him. And this guy didn't even die, but still there was a riot.
He still ran. It's like I'm running for you. I'm trying to say.
And the funny thing is this. I mean, it's not a funny story, but it is comical. Like, I mean, he was probably a woke city cop.
It's like that meme where it's like I wonder what he's thinking about when he's lifting and he's holding the bar. It's like, if I don't pick this up, my family dies. But in this time, it's like a cop running away from somebody with a knife, and he's like, if I can't get out of harm's way non-lethally, this entire city's gonna burn.
Yeah. And that's sort of what reminds me of the whole the line from not the Running Man, Demolition Man, where we're cops, we're not trained to handle this kind of violence. It's like, then what are you doing? And you saw Minneapolis, it's police, or not Minneapolis, this is back in Kenosha. They didn't successfully like deploy their police or anything. They were one of the towns that started cutting back on funding. But you had the riots with there was nobody protecting a lot of the like keeping the peace downtown. Mm-hmm. And so you had private individuals who, like, the police was absolutely not doing its job. You had to have private individuals come out and defend those businesses, including a certain Mr. 17-year-old boy who ended up becoming a darling of like PragerU or whatever he's doing.
Only after he was found innocent.
Only after he was found innocent.
Everybody threw him under the bus when it first happened.
Really? I don't remember nobody really on the right.
I have memories of Charlie Kirk being unreliable in the early days.
Well, Charlie Kirk is very much an unreliable person today too.
He's always unreliable. Yeah. But I want to make some sort of commentary on this because, like, you're talking about it from the civilian side. So I was deep in the federal government system when this whole COVID thing happened. Like, I was at a base for basic training when the lockdown started. So I had the full frontal force of the federal government and what they actually would have done if they had the power to enforce all these laws and restrictions, which essentially, literally, police state, we were made to wear masks all the time. We were made to stand 6 feet apart. Literally, we would get punished every time we stepped out of 6 feet apart distance, at least if we were outside in public. The military at least prioritized everything but religious services. So if training needed to be done, it got done. But how dare a soldier request that he sees like a priest or anything while he's at basic training? And it just kind of shows me like what the belly of the beast. If the federal government had the authority to just lock down the entire country, they would have. And it would have actually looked like what soldiers had to deal with not being able to go to church, not receive, say, the sacraments, not or whatever religious service you do. And you would have just had literally every single right stripped away from you, but they had to use other methods to control people, like say forcing businesses to abide by regulations, and some regulations, if the business couldn't follow them, they were forced to shut down their operation, like say small mom and pop shops, unlike the great Walmarts. But yeah, essentially, like they had to use alternative methods, indirect methods to control the populace. So it was a form of, they wanted full-blown tyranny, but that was unrealistic. And they could only enforce that on actual federal employees at the time. But it was really a test of how much force that they could realistically exert. That's what I have to say on that, and that's why like it felt so anarchic and restrictive. But in reality, I experienced like the brunt of it at the time.
So you think it was a matter of like actual state capacity, that the state wanted to go harder on lockdowns, but for some reason it couldn't?
That is my going theory because I saw it.
Okay, because it didn't seem as though the state really took new powers during COVID at all, right? Like, you know, I remember, I don't know how old you guys were when this happened, but the Sandy Hook shooting happened, and conservatives at the time were saying like, we need to enforce the gun laws that we already have on the books, and it really seemed as though the government was just using all of the emergency powers that sort of already existed on the books, and the state of emergency was declared, I'm pretty sure even ratified by Congress. So once that happens, pretty sure the state has at that point all the authority it wants. So if it didn't perform, didn't go with the measure, I would have to assume that it didn't want to. Like we were in a state of emergency that only ended what, like 4 or 5 months ago. Feels like.
I mean, it depended on which state governments also had a big key in it. Which America's not a centralized state like certain countries are, like say France. The French federal government was able to enforce all these regulations and restrictions long term, but the United States, I would say it's actually less realistic than a centralized state, like France or Ukraine, or because of our federal nature. And that's why like you had like states like, I live in Montana, you had almost no
Sorry, keep going. We lost him.
I think we briefly lost him.
Okay, well, I would just say, anyway, I don't really consider COVID itself to be an example of anarcho-tyranny. It was just good old-fashioned regular tyranny. I think that, there's an intersection of COVID with, the 2020 riots, but we see that same dynamic even when there isn't a COVID emergency, like we saw in 1993. That was actually the prototypical example that San Francisco referred to, which is actually, I don't think it happened yet, that Lou Rockwell uses. So he gives 2 examples of anarcho-tyranny as U.S. policy. The first one was the LA riots, where you saw, sorry, let me make sure, where the police were enforcing the 7-day waiting period that California had during an active riot situation. Although I had heard that some police officers were like sort of on their off time, like driving into what one might call distressed areas and tossing ammunition onto the rooftops. So, but on a policy level, they were,
And then you get back to it. You don't have Kyle Rittenhouse this time, but you do have roof Koreans. It's the
yeah. I'm not sure how many of them actually ended up getting. I know definitely more than a few did. But we also saw it in the war in Iraq too, where America was more focused on going after anybody who was saying like pro-Saddam slogans than they were against people that were like looting embassies and hospitals. There's actually a news article from 2003 where people were coming from across provincial lines into Baghdad, because what you have in a lot of these middle income countries is like one relative who owns a shop in the city while the rest of the family, lives in the city, rather lives outside the city. And then, all your brothers and cousins and stuff, when things are going down, they don't, see, in Iraq, they don't flee the cities when bad things are going down. They enter the cities to protect their things of value that are in there, right? Even though they live out in a small town. And let me make sure. Yeah, Lou Rockwell says, and this was written right in the days of. He said, in Iraq in the last 2 days, you could rob a home and hospital and have your rights protected by the U.S. military. But if you held up a picture of Saddam Hussein, you would likely get yourself shot. This underscores a primary focal point of the rule of every regime to maintain and tighten its monopoly over the coercive powers of the state while displacing and eliminating possible competitors to that position. I remember I read a tweet where somebody argued that we actually don't need the term anarcho-tyranny. The term tyranny suffices because this kind of selective enforcement could be seen in right at the end of colonial America. Because in the Declaration of Independence, one of the cited grievances against the crown is a refusal to, or a failure by the king's forces to protect people near the Ohio River Valley from Indian raids. They use a much harsher word than Indian raids. Although I'm not sure if that qualifies. It could qualify as anarcho-tyranny. We could toss that around. I mean, you know, the British had prosecuted quite a major war to pacify these tribes and the French during this period. And it would seem to be a limitation of state capacity if, you know, you're trying to charge taxes to re-raise revenue and you are failing to launch, you know, punitive expeditions into Indian territory to stop them from doing their own raids into British America.
Here's a controversial...
And I'm not sure how true it was that the British were like going after any white person that like defended themselves from an Indian raid. Like if you did that, you know, suddenly British forces are there to like knock on your door, like, "Hey, I heard that you opened fire on a member of the Haudenosaunee tribe." Like,
oi, mate, did you fire onto the Asani tribe? That's going to. Did you have a license for that? Well, we're now going to fine you and burn your property.
Just for anybody reviewing this tape later, Haudenosaunee is actually a real tribe. I think that's the endonym for the Iroquois, but I could be wrong.
Here's another potentially. I don't know if you would agree with this. It's just something, a thought that came to mind. What about the South? I mean, this one might be a little controversial, but the South immediately following the Civil War.
Yeah, textbook case.
With the carpetbaggers coming down.
Yeah,
the federal government wasn't really doing anything, and then you basically, of course, you start getting. You had
I think that was just good old-fashioned anarcho-anarchy there at the time. Actually, I'm thinking about it.
I mean, you also had the first Klan, which started which essentially became like a militia group to fight against carpetbag. At least at first. Well, at first they were technically a fraternity, just like a veterans club for Southerners before it turned. It basically did start like a veterans club, and then it became attacking carpetbaggers, and then it became terrorizing blacks. But either way, I mean, and of course, not making any moral comparisons here, but you often do see when there is clearly a government presence, but the government isn't doing anything to protect the interests of its citizens. You do have these groups that ultimately emerge in order for the stated reason of protecting certain group interests.
So yeah, that one was the kind of anarcho-anarchy, though, because it seemed as though the state was like the state was clearly unwilling to protect people or unable in either direction, right? Like it had just enough capacity to like disenfranchise, you know, most of the population, but you know, it couldn't really protect blacks from the Klan, and it couldn't really protect whites from marauders. So it seems like in either case there was just a lack of control.
So I'm going to comment on this because, like, I know Iraq was brought up. I'm going to use instead Afghanistan as an example. So when we occupied Afghanistan, like the most forces we had in Afghanistan, I think at its peak were around 200,000 personnel, but 200,000 personnel for a population of 40 some million. You know, you're going to have to make some compromises on how you do your occupation, and it's ultimately your state capacity. So you need to ally with certain groups that are willing to work with you. If you're, no matter what regime, whether domestically or foreignly, if you're occupying or if you're in a state, like you always have client groups. In Afghanistan, for instance, the American regime turned a blind eye to Bakubazi, which was a practice by certain Afghanis where they would rape young boys. In particular, that was punished by the Taliban, but these people were liberated by the United States as long as they were essentially a client group and ally for the U.S. in Afghanistan.
Yeah, this is like kind of sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like it's just a matter of state issues. You know, like a regime only has a certain amount of power that they can exert, and you have to make allies. You have to have client groups to support you in the running of your regime, or to even occupy the ranks of your regime. Like
It should
say
be noted,
the United States.
If it's a failure of state capacity, it can't be anarcho-tyranny, right? So here's an example of something that isn't anarcho-tyranny. You know, you have the fall of Berlin, okay, where the SS is going around press ganging, 14-year-old German girls into like using flak as artillery to fight advancing Russians.
It sounds like an anime plot.
Yeah, something like that. Some isekai from hell. Like, I got hit by a bus and now I'm been brought into the People's Stormtroops to fight for the defense of Berlin? ? Where so the German government was going around like finding deserters, shooting them, but at the same time it wasn't protecting the people from from Soviet forces who were going around the exact same city, sometimes the exact same block, and like raping like 1 in every 5 women in the city. But that wasn't anarcho-tyranny, because if the German government could kill those Russians, it would have, right? That was just a matter of truly only having the ability to enforce the laws against desertion, or what else would it have been? Shirking, economic sabotage. That's not anarcho-tyranny. That's just tyranny with a weak state, right? However, it does become kind of a matter of policy for the United States to do anarcho-tyranny because America has declared itself to be sort of the enemy of all authoritarian regimes everywhere, and then ultimately the enemy of all conservative regimes everywhere. That means that America is going to naturally ally itself with, what did Donald Trump say? They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and the occasional good person. These are very often the foot soldiers of American foreign policy. Besides America's actual foot soldiers, these tend to be the local support. We often open up the prisons. We empower literal criminals, and the Bolsheviks did very similar things during the Russian Civil War. If you read Pyotr Wrangel's Always with Honor, actually, you can see how the Bolsheviks like to bolster their forces with like literal criminals. So in the case of Afghanistan, you saw America, yes, allying with, we need to defeat the Taliban, so we need local support against the Taliban. Who is opposed to the Taliban? I was like, well, we have a lot of liberals, but they've already fled to the United States. I guess we can kind of bring them back, but who in Afghanistan is opposed to this conservative, Sunni theocratic regime? And it's like, well, I guess we have a bunch of kid-touching, drug-dealing warlords. I guess we could pay them in Viagra.
I think of the movie Blazing Saddles, where you had the governor who ended up paying the bandits, to terrorize the town because he wanted to buy it for the railroad, and then purposefully got the black sheriff hired so the people would. Have you never seen that movie, Marcel?
Never seen it.
Blazing
I only
Saddles?
know one scene from Blazing Saddles. It's actually no, I know 2 scenes from Blazing Saddles. One of them is stop, he's got a gun, right? No. And the other one is what did you expect? These are good salt of the earth people, morons. Those are the only 2 scenes from that movie.
Oh no, that was all ad-libbed, actually.
Oh.
So yeah, no, that scene was all ad-libbed. But
there's actually a really good quote from Donald Rumsfeld actually on the on that looting that happened in Baghdad in 2003, and I know you've heard it before. And he says, while no one condones looting, on the other hand, one can understand the pent-up feelings that may result from decades of repression and people who've had members of their family killed by that regime, for them to be taking their feelings out on that regime. And I don't think there's anyone in any of those pictures who wouldn't accept it as part of the price of getting from a repressed regime to freedom. Think what's happened in our cities when we've had riots and problems and looting. Stuff happens. I mean, that's the Republican Secretary of Defense under George Bush basically hitting us with, well, some people are doing some things.
Yeah, do you also remember there was that there was that Seth Rogen quote. Hold on. Believe it or not, it's actually really funny.
And this refers back to an earlier conversation we've had where, it shows that, Lou Rockwell's not weird for making the connection between the LA riots and policy in Baghdad, because clearly Donald Rumsfeld thinks the exact same thing. He looks at it and he also thinks, yes, this is just like the LA riots. These 2 things are connected in a variety of ways. And so you have now I mean, you know why Donald Rumsfeld talks about Iraq like that? Because he's a hostile occupier, right? So of course he thinks of Iraq like that. It would be weird if he didn't think of Iraq like that, because Donald Rumsfeld is an enemy of Iraq, right? It makes sense.
I don't know. I just think this is a funny one to share. Seth Rogen flamed for dismissing LA car break-ins.
Just the result of living in a big city.
Yeah. No, so,
actually, this is a good opportunity.
Like,
go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so he says, Seth Rogen, actor, writer, producer, pottery mate. Okay. I did not know he made pottery. Thank you, therap.com, for enlightening me with that information. No, but what did he say? When people talk about being I'm trying to find the actual tweet. Oh, so he says, dude, I've lived in Los Angeles for over 30 or 20 years. You're nuts. Haha. It's lovely here. Don't leave anything valuable in it. It's called living in a big city, yet is getting mad about the I don't know. I just think it's like it's funny in a very sad way.
I remember so this must have been okay, I know this is before Donald Trump was elected, because when Donald Trump was elected, all ISIS activity in Europe basically came to a screeching halt. But there was an attack in London, and Sadiq Khan, was maybe even still is the mayor of London.
He is, unfortunately.
He had a line about, like, something being part and parcel of a big city. However, this quote was actually misunderstood greatly, because he wasn't saying that terror attacks were part and parcel of living in a big city. What he was referring to were actually the variety of security measures he was introducing, including like a sharp uptick in the number of cameras and foot patrols by the British Metropolitan Police. And he was saying security measures like this of Britain's strangely militarized yet also ineffectual police, free and yet at the same time overpriced, right? That was part and parcel of living in a big city. So it's just kind of funny whenever I hear that, oh, that's life in the big city, I instinctively remember it's like, technically that guy was misunderstood. But Seth Rogen really means it. Seth Rogen is like, yeah, when you live in a city, there's just going to be like lots of crime, and there's just nothing you can do about it. I think
Seth Rogen should write like a song called "Try That in a Big City."
It'll be fine.
Just because about how the cops won't do anything.
Listen, you can't hide in a small town. I will say that was my main objection to that Jason Aldean song. Okay, like they try it in a small town all the time. They get away with it every single time. I honestly, if you defend your own, I recommend you don't try that in a small town. Actually, if you want to take care of your own, don't try that. Honestly, especially not in a small town, you will get in trouble.
But yeah, no, just I know, going a little off topic there. We mentioned that one song, the Richmond, north of Richmond.
I've never actually listened to it yet.
Yeah, neither have I. No, I haven't even heard the small town. But like, what I just find really funny is just the media is basically gaslighting people into thinking these are like exclusively right-wing songs and stuff. So it's like, try that in a small town. I've heard so many, like, there are so many worse things in like outlaw country, like Johnny Cash. And it just like looking at those, like, I don't know. I just think it's really dumb. And they're finding, they're trying to
they are right-wing songs. We shouldn't play ourselves here. These are appealing to a mindset that is basically exclusively to be found among like white right-wingers in the United States, right? Same with Richmond, north of Richmond. I mean, there is sort of a history of like left populist folk songs. Woody Guthrie comes to mind, although perhaps word populist may not be quite accurate for him. But I mean, these songs...
Populist might be better to refer to someone like Johnny Cash, I feel.
Yeah, something like this. Although that Richmond, north of Richmond song, I shared an article about it recently. It sort of came all at once, So Try That in a Small Town was like a genuine controversy because he came out with the song and the left actually did, they were upset with it, and then it's like banned from like Country Music Awards and some other channels. Like that's actually banned.
Those are also run by woke people.
Yeah, they're also run by woke. Yeah, they're also run by it. Yep, they're all run by those socialistic woke people. And but this new song that's come out, Richmond, north of Richmond, I found it highly suspicious, maybe 2 or 3 days ago, when not only did it come out, but it seems as like the guy had a Twitter account that appeared like the day before, and he had 200,000 followers. All of the like major right-wing account tastemakers were sharing it, saying like, "Oh, the left doesn't want you to hear this song." It's like they did a great job apparently until like 30 seconds ago. I don't know how they managed to keep it under the seal that long. Everybody's listening to the song, like everybody's telling me about it. I don't listen to it. And I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was like, what is the angle on this song? Again, I still haven't listened to it. And there was one idea now that I have, which is just, I know Nick Fuentes was really upset by it for reasons I don't even remember. I don't really listen to Nick Fuentes. I just know ambiently that he was upset by it. But on the one hand, I think now it just simply sponsored content. I think that song was, I think the Daily Wire and a few other influencers were just given, here's $100,000 and like, great, here's a message from our sponsor. And without disclosing it, they're all just sharing the video. But at the same time, I think to some extent it kind of is, the song is kind of like a palate cleanser where
it definitely, like I heard part of it and it definitely sounded like real, if that makes sense. It actually sounded like it came from like a place of raw emotion. Again, like country's not really my type of music, but
yeah, I need to listen to the lyrics. But it just seems weird to me that two country songs should come out in like a 3-week span, one after the other. And
the Jason Aldean one, but that's like big corporate country though. That's not like.
But that one's facing actual controversy, right? Like Jason Aldean's song, he's actually had to apologize for writing it. It's banned from awards.
Is it actually like that was manufactured?
But why do you have to apologize if it wasn't?
No, all I'm saying is it was a manufactured controversy. Like it wasn't a natural controversy. It was something that people were trying to purposefully stir up. I don't think people.
Okay, I see. We're talking past each other. So there's like 3 layers of manufactured controversy. So there's a controversy because people are like genuinely upset, right? There's a controversy where people are pretending to be upset, and then there's a controversy where people are pretending that somebody else is upset. So in the case of Try That in a Small Town, you have people pretending to be upset. They're not actually upset.
Yes,
but they are saying that they're upset. Okay,
or they're pretending to be upset and have managed to successfully gaslight a bunch of other people into being legitimately upset.
Yes, fine. But then Richmond, north of Richmond, is like even faker than that because nobody's actually upset by the song, but Matt Walsh is saying that people are upset by.
Yes.
Right. So that's why I'm saying like there was a certain genuineness in that Jason Aldean really did kind of trigger the libs in a way that this Richmond, north of Richmond guy's name I don't remember, right, really did not. And I think, again, having not actually listened to Richmond, north of Richmond, but I think it is because, as they say, Try That in a Small Town was inherently like a racialized song, right? All the things he was complaining about and saying like, try that in a small town. Like he was complaining about like, Black Lives Matter riots and, the attendant.
That just sounded like a boomer Trump song, basically. Like that's the vibes I got.
Sure. Nonetheless, his complaints were distinctly racial, right? And I have a feeling that if I were to listen to Richmond, north of Richmond, I would find that it was, there's no that there's no controversial racial content at all. And that, it's just going to be about, the elites and how much they, how much they suck and they don't care about the little guy. And so I think in a way, this promotion of this song is to get people not thinking about Try That in a Small Town, a song that actually liberals really were upset about because it kind of did hit a nerve, to a song that doesn't hit anybody's nerves. And we're just telling you that it's hitting somebody's nerves just to, please move your attention away from, the lady getting punched in the back of the head, and please focus on like taxes. Because Try That in a Small Town, that's all it talks about. Like, it doesn't talk about, I don't even know why I'm doing this. We just look it up right now. I can just look up the lyrics. So I registered the prediction. I have not listened to the song. You like those Cherry MX Brown switches, tactile? You can.
Very much so.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drive my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me and people like you. Wish I could wake up and it not be true, but it is, oh, it is. Living in the new world with an old soul, these rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all want to have total control, want to know what you think, want to know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. Because your dollar ain't shit, it's tax no end, because the rich men north of Richmond. I wish politicians would look out for minors, and not just minors on an island somewhere. Wait.
Epstein reference, clearly.
Right, but does he mean he doesn't want them looking out for the minors on an island somewhere, or does he mean?
I think he just wrote. I think it was that's just a poorly written lyric. I think he's talking about that they want to look out for them, like not that they're actually looking out for them, but that they like want the politicians like the minor. I just don't think that was a well written line.
Lord, we got folks on the street ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milk and welfare. Well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds. Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground because all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. World of taxes no end. Okay, yeah. So he's complaining about taxes and welfare payments, which, you know, that's kind of, yeah. I haven't listened to the song. I'm just reading the lyrics. And, you know, as far as like edgy political content, this is like a much less edgy song than Try That in a Small Town. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. But also I feel like this one though comes from a legitimate concern, whereas the other one, the Aldine guy, he's just cashing off of like already pre-existing cultural outrage.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Either way, back to the main subject at hand. We were discussing in media specific historical examples of anarcho-tyranny. What other major ones can you think of? We're going to be joined here in about 10 minutes by Paul Fahrenheit filling in, because we were originally supposed to have a 4-person panel, but that kind of fell apart.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
but either way, so we're going to be joined by Paul Fahrenheit in about 10 minutes. But
yeah, so we're looking for states that can enforce a law, they can bring violence to bear, and they can't. So definitely a non-case. So a state that can't stop barbarian rage is not anarcho-tyranny. If they could, they would. You know, a state that can't stop, you know, the Soviets from rampaging through Berlin. If they could, they would. A state that can't stop like Indian incursions into settlements, not because if they could, they would. On the other hand, if you have a state that, you know, it can't stop criminals, but it can bring the SWAT team and kick down your door for defending yourself, that's anarcho-tyranny. So, you know, you have a full military occupation in Iraq, and yet at the same time, no ability. You have the National Guard presence in LA, but no ability to stop it, so that's anarcho-tyranny.
It's almost the exact inverse of like a Nozikian night watchman state.
yes, that's right. Yes,
so, yeah.
It's anti-no-chick. It's like Bizarro. We do everything but cops, courts, and national defense.
Yeah. Oh God, that would be that needs to be another.
Call that misarchism.
Misarchism. No, yeah, no, that's good. So
yeah, you know, true kakistocracy there.
Yeah. Just no.
Probably.
Okay. Part of me wants to say 16th century Ottoman Empire, but I don't think that's a good example.
No, I was gonna think maybe like the Troubles or something, where the RUC could operate with like a free hand, but that's different. I mean, no, that doesn't count. That wouldn't really make any sense. It's a pretty uniquely like liberal phenomenon in the sense of like, you know, generally in a monarchy, it's kind of hard to like pull this insanity off because the monarch has the monarch is simply in charge, and if he doesn't like you, he will just send people to arrest you. It's only when there's a sort of lip service to this idea of like equality, you know, sort of weaponization of bureaucratic principles and like equality before the law that's really like twisted and perverted. So yeah, it's really like primarily an American export.
That makes sense. Like, have you seen? Did you ever see a Clockwork Orange or read the book?
Nope.
No. Okay. So basically, we'll have Paul here. We'll wait and talk about the Paul's the media guy, so we'll wait till he gets here before we discuss that part. But what other examples do you think you would identify within the past? So post 2020.
Post 2020.
So other than the riots,
easy. The UK. Yeah. I forgot. Jesus, the UK. Wasn't there some girl, some like 14-year-old girl who got arrested in the UK for telling a cop that she looked like a lesbian?
Oh yeah. Hold on, I'm pulling that up.
Yeah, the UK is like a perfect case example of that. What else?
Dankula.
Dankula teaching his dog to
the sea Kyle,
yeah.
A joke which literally quite exists on the very premise that to understand it, you have to agree that National Socialism is bad.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm like running through. In Ukraine, where yes. Let me think about that one before I toss that one out there. Let me temporarily retract that Ukraine.
Pulling up the. Oh, also they're misgendering it. Become. Oh, here's a good one right here. Did you hear about Mizzy?
Yes. Have you seen Mizzy's content managers?
That's what I'm doing right now. That's what I'm sharing. I'm doing the. We're gonna watch it. We'll watch the Pierce Morgan one here. I'm gonna get copy. I don't know. This is the. I'll pass forward past his goofiness, but yeah, no. Here's he with.
Actually, Mizzy had a great line in it. I wish we could scrub straight to it, but there's a point. We don't have to watch this whole thing. I think we all know who Mizzy is. He was a guy who was walking into houses and into people's cars. But there's a part where he actually says, like, the laws of the UK are weak, mate. You know, that's not my fault. You know, don't bother me.
Yeah,
and he's like, I mean, honestly, you're right, Mizzy. You know what? This discussion's over. You know who else had a similar thing to say about like that? What's the Julian Malema, the guy in South Africa who had the song "Kill the Boer," and there's a part where he was interviewed by, like, I think it was by a white woman in a news channel, and she asked him about the song, and he says, I do not know why you are asking me about the song. Okay, we have already said it is a political song, and it is not a racist song, and it is not violate the laws against racism. And we have already been taken to court on this, and the court has said that it's not a racist song. So I do not know why you are talking to me. The court has said that we are allowed to sing it, and so we're going to sing it. It's like, you're right, man. The discussion's over, you know? Like, he said he wants to sing it, and the court said it's okay. You're not going to make him not want to sing it. So, you know, your problems have been...
The question is are they going to treat Try That in a Small Town with the same standard?
Try that on a small farm. We do. 75 times a year. We do.
Try that on a small farm. Yeah. But either way,
that's the thing. That's the thing with that song, right? You stress test it and you find that, like, oh yeah, okay, you know.
Basic risk assessment regarding health issues on the barge. I mean, that seems.
And this is after all the fire safety stuff we'd already. I mean,
yeah.
Get a checklist, guys.
Yeah, you would have thought so. Okay, we're going to move on to the Mail on Sunday.
Wow,
now, this is about
Anglo-Saxons here, huh?
Week, and I've seen this crop up on Twitter pretty much continually. What's this?
Yeah, this is another sad story, and I've seen that video as well. Very distressful. So the story is ongoing. The teenager, 16-year-old autistic girl, who happened to apparently allegedly have called a police officer in West Yorkshire lesbian, or saying she looks like a lesbian, like my nana.
Exactly.
And her grandma is a lesbian.
Yeah.
And so she was saying this police officer looks like her. Now, it's a tricky one. The video is pretty harrowing because you have this autistic teenager screaming, hitting herself in the head. She doesn't want to be touched by the police officer. The police officer is saying, no, we're going to arrest you anyway. The mother is saying, look, she's autistic. Can't you see what's going on?
And 7 of them, by the way.
And 7 of them, exactly. Now, we've had, for instance, Harry Miller from Fair Cop on GB News talking about that the West Yorkshire police are effectively like a criminal gang, that they were breaking.
I think the footage. Yeah, here's the actual footage.
Police are investigating complaints after a 16-year-old girl was arrested for making an offensive comment against these officers. This is despite the mum telling them her daughter was autistic. Police say the video only offers a snapshot of the incident. Police are investigating complaints after a
Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this framing is like, oh, well, she's autistic. Like, say she wasn't, right? Right. I mean, in my mind, this is bad framing. It implies that, like, you have to be mentally ill to notice or say it. You know. Yeah,
maybe that's why everybody's being diagnosed autistic now, because
I can assure you, it does not protect you. I've tried; it doesn't work. You know, I mean, this is like, daddy, the emperor's not wearing clothes, and it's like, emperor gets mad at, like, mentally ill child. It's like, no. I don't think the mental illness of this child in this case is a problem here.
Yeah, no, but but either way, with the UK, yeah, no, the Mizzy thing though, that was ridiculous. We were talking about. I remember this was, what was it? Maybe about 3 weeks ago.
A month ago, tops. Yeah.
3-4 weeks ago.
He was going around like, hey, oh, mate, do you want to die? Do you want to die? He went to a library and was like tearing up books. He was, I mean, people like that, I mean, they just like mischief, right? I mean, they just enjoy it. You know, nobody's gonna stop him. He was put under some kind of probation where he's on some kind of probation where, so normally trespassing in England is a civil offense, not a criminal offense. So like you walk, like, unless you commit, you breaking and entering with a weapon, like, you know, walking around in somebody's living room is just, you know, they have to sue you. But he's on a thing where, like, no, you now when you trespass, it's a criminal offense. So he is on like a sort of an upgrade, you know. You do it again, this time you're really in trouble.
So wait, in a Anarcho-tyranny, would you say that like a tiered justice system is a quality of it, possibly even a necessary quality? Like I know this is, I mean, this example departs from Anarcho-tyranny, but you think about, like, you know, Hunter Biden recently, right? Like, you know, like, for instance.
Oh my God, are you saying is Hunter Biden's cocaine usage like Anarcho-tyranny? No. I mean,
no. I'm just using that as an example of like a tiered justice system. For instance,
yeah, but that's like a separate thing. I mean, it's just whatever. You know, honestly, if you're the president's son and you don't do cocaine, like, what are you doing? You know, like,
I mean, okay, it's clear.
You're just wasting your talents. I'm pretty sure
Donald Trump Jr. definitely did coke. Like,
yeah, honestly, that's just a perk of the territory. You know, you take a little, you know, Ukrainian oil company money, you know, here, even though you don't even speak the language, it's whatever. You know, I think some things we just need to accept are just going to happen. You know, try that in a small republic. You know, you just, you know, it's just going to happen. You know, that's nowhere near the worst thing that, like, the child of a sovereign has done. Okay, Uday and Qusay, you know, talk about Iraq. Uday and Qusay Hussein used to drive around kidnapping women, tying them to, and then they would, you know. So, you know, you do some cocaine here and there. Just who am I to judge?
What about another one? What about ever since the U.S., because the U.S. are stationed there, Somalia now. I mean, I know I know the pirates are basically most like piracy in Somalia is not anywhere near as significant as it used to be. But you still basically just have the U.S. military presence focusing on defending the territory. But it's still, there's still no government basically whatsoever. Like, the same shit's more or less happening.
Yeah, that's just anarchy. That's just
okay. But the U.S. does have the capacity to actually keep the peace, but they're just holding.
I mean, to invade all Somalia, like.
Yeah, I mean, more or less, or to have a presence in Africa there and in Djibouti. Of course, Djibouti's a bit more stable, but either way.
Djibouti, I hardly know her.
Djibouti, but yeah, no. Either way, so yeah, no. I really wish we had a. Okay, Paul's coming. No, but.
I mean, we've been going for like an hour, 2 minutes, so we can just.
I mean, normally I like to go for an hour and a half or two. I really wish that tonight worked out better. I wasn't really looking forward to this one, but.
It's all right. I mean, we can just try it again another time if you want.
Let's just do that. Yeah, we can try it again another time. All right. Either way, I'm probably going to end up taking this one down, or you know what? I might preserve it. I might leave it as. I might just change it from a Pigpen to just a regular stream.
I don't even know what that means.
Oh no! It's the show is called. Okay, you're going to find this funny. My show was originally called The Political Pigpen. Or that is what it is called. But I was originally going to call it The Political Cesspool, and then I realized there was already a white nationalist radio show called.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure.
So I
not that I would know.
Yeah, no, the black face of white supremacy, Marcel Gautreau.
Yeah.
No, but either way, no. So I did want to talk about fictional examples though of Anarcho-tyranny. I felt like this. I mean, might be a fun one.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay. I'm just
I have
looking
a list.
now.
I do actually have a list here.
Let's hear them.
Well, no, I'm just going to the TV tropes one, since that made it in there.
Okay, yeah.
Anarcho-tyranny is on TV tropes now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I wanted to. I have that pulled up.
It doesn't give real life. Oh wait, no. Okay, I see.
No, it does give. Yeah, hold on. There we go.
Okay,
So, yeah,
it gives
well,
1984. That one's dubious. Because
1984 is not anarcho-tyranny.
yeah, proles and animals are free, but proles are not free to like commit crime against the outer party.
No.
That would be anarcho-tyranny, right? If proles were regularly going into outer party homes and just brutalizing them, and then an outer party member complains about it, and then it's like, oh, you get a visit in the middle of the night and you get like thought police. That would be anarcho-tyranny. Let's see.
So we got, I don't know how, I'm not particularly familiar with it, but Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z. The Demon King Piccolo escapes from his prison and proceeds to take over the world after regaining his youth and sending his minions. Is Piccolo the green guy?
Yes, Piccolo is the green guy.
I don't know. I'm not familiar. I'm not very familiar with.
Yes, Piccolo is the green guy.
Okay. Comic books. Batman No Man's Land, an event where the United States decides to abandon Gotham City to its own devices follows.
If you're free to, how's this? If you are able to legally defend yourself from violence, you're almost certainly not in anarcho-tyranny. You're just either in anarchy or tyranny.
Okay.
Like that's like the easiest test. Like if I'm attacked by a criminal and I shoot him in the face, do I get arrested? If I do, then anarcho-tyranny. So.
Oh. We have Mr. Fahrenheit. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty great, Mr. Politicrat. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, no, this originally we were supposed to, so we had Marcel and then we had Kirkpatrick. However, I hadn't heard back from Kirkpatrick since this past Saturday, even though he said this time was going to work for him. So, I hope everything's fine, but yeah, no, so he didn't get back to me after Saturday when I asked him to confirm. But then Foe just had a child. So
okay, Samurai Jack. The very last example in the Western animation, Samurai Jack is like a perfect case actually.
So yeah, but thanks either way for coming, Paul.
Sure. I just have no idea.
Arkham City is also a good example.
Oh no, so yeah, we were talking about historical examples of anarcho-tyranny, and we came in to start talking about because nowadays you see it. Basically, it has almost become a trope in fiction, especially like I think going back to like a Clockwork Orange, especially. But you almost see it manifest itself in fiction more frequently these days, which almost makes me wonder if it has just become embedded within the cultural zeitgeist in which we live now. Like people know and can identify anarcho-tyranny, but might not have actually heard the term or read Sam Francis, which I think is very usually the case.
I'll at least say this. I've always found narco-tyranny is it's just there's nothing anarchic about it. It's just tyranny. That's all it is. It's literally just tyranny. It's an unequal application of the laws and a general what is it? It's late, but yeah, basically it's just an unequal application of the laws by the governing power who occupies the seat of enforcers of the laws. So I mean, and I Francis is helpful. Putting anarcho in front of it kind of describes our current situation we're in, but I don't know.
So Marcel was defining it just a little bit ago. Like, I mean, the litmus test to see if discover if it's anarcho-tyranny or not is whether or not you're allowed to own guns or self.
No. It's whether or not. Yeah, if we've something. Yeah, so thought of an example, but I can't use it. So I thought of two.
Sorry,
I just thought of a couple of examples, but I can't say it.
Try to say it in the most optics-friendly way possible.
You can have a situation where two populations foreign to each other live amongst each other, and maybe one of those populations likes to like burn farms or something, and they're protected by like force of law, maybe even like a military occupation of some kind, and the other population experiences sort of a military occupation, maybe checkpoints or whatever. So you have like sort of a two-tiered system. Even if the that secondary population may even commit violent acts of its own, but the full force of the law is like there to punish them for their violent acts. But the other population can launch its own incursions and are really sometimes even just encouraged to do it. A situation like that, that would basically be anarcho-tyranny.
So I understand that, but you know, I'm a historian by trade, and the historical examples of tyranny I can think of are particularly any sort of despotic figure or cabal that primarily, you know, you bring up the example you what in this thing you put forth, Mr. Marcel, of the two populations living next to each other. Is one of them considered native to
I can't
the
say.
polity in question? You can't say.
Can't say.
Okay, in let's take this situation and totally abstract it. All right, like there's no real world examples were harmed in the making of this thought experiment. Um, let's assume one of these populations is native. All right, the marker of tyranny generally is the preference for foreign groups and or foreign customs of foreign groups over the native populace, be that those native culturally or more closer to the biological level. Examples I could think of would be Frederick II in the Holy Roman Empire, because he primarily based his administration in Sicily, and he very famously had a bodyguard of Muslims, which was extremely unpopular amongst the rest of the Holy Roman Empire. There was also there's a myriad of examples even earlier in classical history of where the word comes from, the tyrants, these sort of despotic kings. Actually, also in Sicily, that's where it comes from. Dionysius the first and second, which used mercenaries. I think from I think it was from different tribes of Greeks, but basically Sicily is a lot of examples of tyranny. But basically, you have these figures, and it's not just despotic figures. It's easy to point at, you know, this is because of the American programming, is that we always point at kings as the example of tyranny, but it's also possible to find tyrannical examples of governing bodies. I guess you could. None immediately come to mind, and I apologize. It's late, gentlemen. And I'm trying to get caught up. I hope I'm not embarrassing myself too much, but that's something I kind of want to emphasize to Mr. Marcel's point.
Yeah, I don't know, the imposition. So like the Norman invasion, that like William the Conqueror was just a tyrant, right?
Yeah. Oh no, that's a perfect example. Yes, William the Conqueror, although he was technically a foreigner, but yes, like that's another good example of the preferencing of one of that's a tyrannical preferencing of basically a foreign people over a sort of more native people. And the Anglo-Saxons did the exact same thing to the Britons, who did the exact same thing to the builders of Stonehenge, to, you know, so basically this is a set of concentric circles. All right. Yesterday's
then you also come into whether or not there's such thing as an indigenous people.
Well, I mean, and yeah, that really is a good point. You know, this is part of the reason why I don't tend to vibe well with blood and soil types. I think there is something to it. Like, you are what you eat, and you actually, you know, the physical composition of your body changes based upon the locality you live in. And that might be, and particularly the food you eat, although that might be part of the reason why we're so deracinated, is that our food comes from literally all four corners of the earth. But I mean, the thing about it is, it's like, if you look at the history of the Indo-Aryans going all the way back, and even their predecessor groups in the Yamnaya and the and earlier cultures like that, every 2,000 years or so, they just pick up and move. They just pick up and move, man. Like you know, there is no like ancient homeland. You know, it's not the Pontic Steppe, because they probably were somewhere before they got to the Pontic Steppe. It's not Europe, because they were somewhere before they got to Europe. And so, yeah, you're right, Mr. Politicrat. It's like,
you can talk about a group having an ethnogenesis, though.
Well,
so, African Americans may come from a diaspora of African places, but African Americans, you can say as a race, are created by the blend of a group of West Africans, and then also like a 20% Scotch Irish. Like, that creates a new group called African Americans that's indigenous to the United States, right?
You're correct, and they don't really have any. I mean, they don't really have any functioning place outside of the United States, except for possibly Liberia. But that's a can of worms. But you are correct, and you can have ethnogeneses of people in the sense that a people. The thing is, though, is it's like what constitutes a people. At what point, and I guess the best answer to that is you know it when you see it, which is, to be honest, the best answer you get in most situations. But no, you are correct in that regard. You do have ethnogeneses. However, there's always a precedent. There's always a group of people preceding that group that you can draw a line back to, which gives you continuity. Like the Scots-Irish, particularly. They're Celticized Angles. They're not really Celtic. They were Angles from the Kingdom of Northumbria that during the Highland clearances and it wasn't the Highland clearances. That was later. It was the Harrowing of the North. That's what it was. During the Harrowing of the North under the aforementioned William the Conqueror, all of the Angles that were in the Kingdom of Northumbria got pushed up into the Scottish borderland. And forgive me, gentlemen, if I'm telling you something you already know. I didn't know this, and it was corrected. I was corrected sufficiently on Twitter. And so they get kicked out of so they're known as the Scots borderers for a while. Because they were like these non-Normanized Angles. They were like this time capsule of Angles before the Norman invasion, and they got Celticized due to proximity to the Highland clans, adopted the clan structure, things like that. And then King James I kicks them out of Scotland. They go to Northern Ireland, and then from Northern Ireland, they come to the United States. But there's a continuity there. There's a continuity. And you could argue that they changed fundamentally when they were kicked out of Northumbria and then changed again when they were kicked out of the borderlands. Because, to your point, Mr. Marcel, yeah, you can have like a new quote-unquote people born over the course of a single generation, and a lot of times that's when it happens. It's like a radical changes create radical changes. So I mean, I guess I know that's a long-winded example, but I guess that's general agreement.
Sorry, that was a shrug. Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, I guess if you want to talk about anarcho-tyranny, the aforementioned, what is it? I think a good example of anarcho-tyranny would actually be Ireland in the centuries about the time of the Stuarts. When it was under the dominion of England, and basically the laws were not equally enforced amongst the people groups there. I'm not one to call out. Actually, I don't even know if the English enforced any law there, really, because like it was just the and try to genocide the Ulstermen, and the Ulstermen would go out and take revenge against the Irishmen. Sorry, guys. I'm talking nervously because no one's...
endemic violence, is kind of its own separate category.
Yeah, but the thing is I don't know if that situation was exactly endemic violence, because England had de jure control over the area and did attempt to, and it did have Irish courts and did attempt to enforce some version of crown law. I don't know. I just don't know enough to properly describe the situation.
I think you're going to struggle to find examples predating 1848.
Predating 1848?
Yep, I'd say it's going to be tough to name it because it's a peculiar dynamic that really only, like, there needs to be first, like, there needs to be a an established rule of law before that dynamic can then be perverted against one group.
That's fair enough. Cringe Walker was here. He could probably talk about some shit about the late Roman Empire, about how something like this. Go ahead.
So I remember Marcel said, because what was it you said about barbarian invasions? If you're functionally unable to stop a barbarian invasion, it is not anarcho-tyranny.
Yes. So the example I gave earlier was Fall of Berlin, right, where the Nazis were forcing 14-year-old girls to use rocket launchers against the advancing Soviets and executing men who would abandon this, lost fight and try to defend their families. Like, sorry, you're deserting, and then shoot them, right? But then they were failing to protect the people of Berlin from, 1 in 5 women getting raped by Red Army soldiers. However, if the German forces could have stopped those Red Army soldiers, they would have, right? It's not just that the state is failing to protect you, but succeeding in hurting you. There has to be an ability and unwillingness, right?
Yeah.
Because you take the guy who's who's dragging some 14-year-old from his mother's arms, sorry, your kid's in the Volkssturm now, and the mother's why are you using violence against me? Why aren't you stopping the Red Army? It was bitch, I'm trying, right?
Yeah.
Listen, if it were up to me, trust me, if it were up to me, if it were up to me, we'd be in their capital, and they'd be doing it to their kid. You know what I mean? So the fact that German people are unprotected from the Red Army doesn't mean, therefore, that the Reich is just a tyranny that is weak.
Fair enough. Yeah, I suppose this specific example is relatively novel, but one of the things I have learned is that there's always precedent for everything, and I think something like this happened prior to modern nation states, or modern liberal nation states post 1848.
The Garden of Eden. That was that Anarcho-tyranny?
I don't know about.
I'm kidding.
That.
But so Marcel was saying that it's specifically, so his take on it is a specifically liberal phenomenon. That's at least the perspective he was coming from, which I guess when you think of it in a context, because we were not able to identify until we were just talking about proposing the idea when we were talking about the migrations just a second ago. Really, the most, I guess, direct examples you can give are all post 1800.
Yeah, there needs to be rule of law. There needs to be an established nation state that controls everything in its borders, and then maintains its double standard.
What about Reign of Terror, Revolutionary France? Because I feel like I'd hesitate to call that anarcho, but
yeah, the question is, if the states, if the criminals simply are the state, that's also just tyranny. That's just tyranny with a weird aesthetic.
Yeah, that was pretty much the post French Revolution. But yeah,
let's go with a Bug's Life, right? If Hopper's goons, when he shows up, he just lets his boys rampage. Those are just Hopper's guys. That's not anarcho-tyranny. This is tyranny.
It's just the mafia. It's just the mafia.
Yeah, this is just my guys doing my thing to you. Yeah, the anarcho-tyranny has to be.
Yeah, with a tyranny, you can kind of point at who the tyrant is, and everyone knows who the tyrant is.
Yeah, it's I defended myself against one of Hopper's goons, and I got attacked for it. That doesn't make any sense. It's no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
that's the most understandable thing in the world. Actually, you're the weird one.
Yeah, I guess with an anarcho-tyranny, it would be you can't. There's no one you can really point to other than some vague conception of the government or something like that.
One might argue maybe that in the Lion King. Now we're just doing Disney movies. In the Lion King. So when Scar invites the hyenas into Pride Rock and to terrorize people,
I was going to bring this up. I was actually going to bring this,
but it's dicey because at a certain point, again, those hyenas are just Scar's forces, right? We don't say Lavrenti Beria's ability to rape women in Moscow makes it anarcho-tyranny because he's Lavrenti Beria, right? So it's I'm the head of I'm the secret police. So it's just whatever. The Purge definitely is anarcho-tyranny.
Yeah. So yeah, we have the Purge, which is I think I'm just gonna say for a second, those movies are an example of a really neat concept with just lazy execution.
So here the same page says that the Galactic Empire and the Republic Arc is the Hutt space and things no, the Empire.
It's not definitely.
I guess vis-a-vis the Hutts, the Empire could stop the Hutts, so there is something there. But for example, the Republic, the Galactic Republic not stopping the Hutts is not anarcho-tyranny because the Republic, not only can it not enforce the anti-slavery laws in Tatooine, it can't even enforce its legal tender laws in Tatooine, right? So that's a definite case. Like, why won't, Qui-Gon, why won't the Republic, free all the slaves? It's like, Anakin, I'm trying to spend Republic credits, and your owner says no. You see, like, the Republic has like a deeper problem here. It's not that like, if the slaves rebelled, then the Republic. Okay, this is like really EU spurging right now. But actually, there was a case of anarcho-tyranny in the Galactic Republic, and it's the Kaleesh versus the Hux. I don't know how well you know the story of General Grievous.
I'm not. So if only Kilhoun were here, because he's the huge Star Wars guy. But I am aware of enough of the expanded universe to know a little bit about General Grievous. I'm talking about the legends, not this canon BS.
Yeah. When I say EU, I only can mean legends. Yeah. So
yeah.
General Grievous's background did in fact revolve around an obscene double standard against his people, the Kaleesh, when they were invaded by a group of aliens I believe was called the Hux. And the Republic would not do anything to protect the Kaleesh because they weren't spacefaring, I believe, from Kaleesh aggression. Rather, the Kaleesh from Huck aggression. And then General Grievous arose as a defender of his people, blah, blah, blah. And then he was on some shuttle to somewhere and it blew up, and Count Dooku was there to rescue him and told him, like, hey, listen, the Jedi did that. And Grievous believed it because the Jedi, I believe, had like obstructed the Kaleesh's ability to defend themselves. So he was like, wow, I hate Jedi now. And then he's like, another fine addition to my collection. This is just pure EU. Like, I was like looking at my bookshelf, because normally when I do talks like this, I always like to recommend something. So I guess a book I'll recommend, because we're hitting the hour 30 mark, is Always with Honor by Pyotr Wrangel, where he describes the slow breakdown or the unraveling of Russian civil society as that war happened. Another one that I might recommend would be Days of Rage by Brian Burra, which tells some very upsetting stories about how back in the 60s and 70s, if you were like a left-wing terrorist, you could like attack the Capitol building with guns and bombs, okay, and like go to jail, and then like Barack Obama will commute your sentence like 40 years later, and then you will go on a Puerto Rican, Heritage Day parade in New York City, and the mayor of New York will just go 3 floats behind, not to appear next to you, and then Lin-Manuel Miranda will just do a private screening of Hamilton just for you, right? Even though you like bombed the Capitol building, and if you take a tour of the Capitol building, they will show you the shrapnel marks on the ceiling from your attack. Some other people carried out bombing, shot a pair of cops in one state, stole their guns, and then shot more cops in New York with those stolen guns that they took from other dead cops. And then they went to jail for a little bit, and then they got released, and they're adjunct professors at Columbia University right now. Probably, and there are tons of other cases in that book. Days of Rage by Brian Burra. You want to talk about anarcho-tyranny? I can't believe I went this entire talk without bringing that one up. Read that book.
I'll be sure to add that one in the show
that
notes.
Belongs on the list. There's an article on a website called Status 451, which talks about a lot of these cases. So, Days of Rage by Brian Burra, Always with Honor by Pyotr Wrangel, I think those are the only 2 books that I have that are relevant to the. If you want a Sam Francis book, Beautiful Losers by Sam Francis, you can read that. Let's see what else. It looks to be all I have on my shelf immediately related to this topic.
But so to go into the last part of our discussion that we were gonna have, it was specifically to be about why do you think? And so I know if you get down into the technical aspect, not all of these fictional examples, they're not all explicitly anarcho-tyranny, but they are kind of in a similar ballpark. Do you think that this is a sort of a deeper reflection of people kind of starting to realize, starting to understand the problems that they see before them. Specifically, if you take a look at like Chicago today, like of course they can they are identifying a specific phenomenon, but they are of course not calling it anarcho-tyranny. Do you think that some of these examples? Do you think that it has entered the cultural zeitgeist, just that phenomenon in general, awareness of it?
Certainly, Tucker's brought the term in. Tucker Carlson has brought the term in. And people are certainly aware of part of the problem. And there's actually, I wish I could find the article sourcing it, but I found that like liberals tend to have a more sophisticated, or not only people who watch like CNN, MSNBC tend to have like a stronger familiarity with like right-wing terms than like people who watch Fox News do, even if people on Fox News have like more agreement with what those terms refer to.
Interesting.
So liberals are more likely to know what the term anarcho-tyranny means.
When you're saying liberal, are you referring to like American, like left liberals?
I mean, people who watch CNN and NBC. That was the actual.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Object of reference. Like,
well, Paul, what do you
level
think?
of like, so yeah, the example they gave was actually the term "great replacement," where I think only like 30% of Fox News watchers know the term "great replacement," but like 70% of them believe that it's happening. Meanwhile, CNN, NBC watchers, like 63% of MSNBC watchers know the term "great replacement," but of course, only like 15%.
It's like barely anybody who says the term "great replacement" uses it. Like, very few people who actually believe in it use that term unironically. Like, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, although I do believe the term did originate on the right.
Like nobody, like people who believe in the Great Replacement don't just call it the Great Replacement.
Yeah,
at this point. Yeah. Like I think even if Yiz were here, like Yiz does not call it the Great Replacement. Either way, Paul, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, in terms of what the concept of how no one is in charge and shit is fucked entering the popular consciousness. I mean, yeah, it's getting.
If no one is in charge, it's not anarcho-tyranny. That's what I got to stipulate. That if no one's in charge, it's just anarchy.
Well, the thing is, though, is it's like I don't know. Who is in charge then of the United? Is the whole point to basically? Okay, so we're gonna let's go with I guess. Well, I mean, the concept of the deep state. I guess that's the most broad example you could bring up is a sort of deep state of insert what you think it is here.
Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
Well, yeah, I mean that may be one aspect of it, but they're not the only ones.
The Bilderbergs and Ellen DeGeneres and Tom Hanks.
Well, I mean,
it's the Clinton crime family.
It's everybody I don't like.
Basically, yeah. Well, I mean, it's everyone who you don't like because they have a very obvious negative effect on everything. It's not that you don't like
Society
them.
used to talk about. Of course, it's the communists and the United Nations. It's the Trilateral Commission, of course. Nobody talks about these groups anymore. You notice?
Club of Rome.
Like the City of London, right? Like dust in the wind. It's all just gone. All these old. I remember Agenda 21. Do you remember that?
Is that in Canada?
No, the idea of Agenda 21. So you know how England has the green belts?
Mm-hmm.
The idea of Agenda 21 is basically that like Britain's green belt system will be forced on the United States by 2021, where everybody would be forced to like leave their small town and then move into like big cities, and then they would declare like all of these areas as giant nature preserves. Didn't happen, but apparently the UN was trying to do it.
I've never heard of that. I thought that was
Alex Jones used to talk about. I'm telling you, we talk all the time. Okay, Alex Jones would talk about that all the time. Agenda 21, that was the thing. It got replaced by Great Reset.
Why is it Agenda 21?
By 2021. It was just, such and such years until global warming reaches a.
I mean,
the Great Reset has replaced it.
They keep moving the goalposts with when global warming is supposed to kill us. So
yeah, and they keep moving the goalposts of when the blue helmet tyranny is supposed to come too.
This is kind of, I mean, I'm trying to pull on the right thread here because I've talked to Tom Luongo a little bit about stuff like this, about how United States fiscal policy was essentially dictated by the City of London until the year like 2020, I think, when so Marcel, your reaction is forcing me to stop talking.
Yeah, I mean that's like some weird sovereign citizen thing. It's just
I don't know. Look,
Yeah,
man,
I mean-
I come from a particular side of this. Like, I don't, this isn't the kind of shit I spend my days thinking about, even on this side of things. So forgive me, I'm a bit of a novice here. But I don't fucking know. I mean,
Yeah, because so you seem pretty well versed on like English history. For those who don't know in your audience, there's the city, London, right? And then there's the city of London, which was a city chartered, I want to say sometime in like the 13th century.
No, yeah, there's the city of London, because then you have Sadiq Khan, who's in the mayor of London, did not come about until like 2009. Like the first mayor of London was Boris Johnson.
Yeah, the city of London is basically its financial district, and it became as such because the city was marked as like a separate, or we might call the old quarter of the city was defined as like a separate feudal holding, which the king in principle needed permission to enter.
It was specifically because William the Conqueror couldn't like besiege it. Its walls were too big, and so he just cut a deal with the merchants that were living in it, and that's where the separation came from.
Yes, and so the City of London, I believe, is or was, maybe even still is, chartered as a corporation, or might presently, in some sense, be chartered as a corporation. And so, a family of conspiracy theories, and I really am reticent to use this term, has emerged on the idea that not only does the City of London compose like a quasi sovereign deep state in from the UK, something almost like the East India Company or something like that, but that also further, yes, that it maintains some kind of legal claim of ownership over the United States government. It is a branch off of like sovereign citizen stuff, like Darrell Brooks, who believed that he was actually, because of the Moroccan-American Treaty of Friendship, he wasn't a person but rather a corporation by the name Darrell Brooks, and therefore not subject to admiralty law. So almost all City of London based explanations of things involve like a very weird, interpretation. You have to wonder, where the City of London legal claim had like emerged, like the War of 1812, or when it came to American debt, or rather English debt to America during World War II. What did the City of London have to say about the Lend-Lease program, I wonder? What did the City of London have to say about destroyers for bases? What did the City of London have to say? It's just yeah, I'm sorry. And City of London is not real in that sense.
Okay. The City of London, it was originally just what it was, it's literally just the blocks of the city that once constituted the old Roman fortress Londinium.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now composes the city's financial district.
Well, yeah, which is the financial district now, yeah.
Yes.
So, but Marcel, I mean, we were talking about the idea of the deep state just a second ago. Well, Marcel, since you're the one, like, for instance, I've read very, very little Sam Francis. I've read like on the anarcho-tyranny aspect, but I have not. I discovered him through Burnham, but I haven't got around to reading like a full book of his. But do you think is there a correlation between the deep state, quote unquote, and anarcho-tyranny, or at least these sort of manufactured policies that produce effects and consequences that are otherwise associated with anarcho-tyranny?
I'm going to say no correlation.
Okay.
These are just two things about America.
Two aspects of America. Okay. Yeah, because I know when we see things like coexisting with each other, we often like to our minds automatically try to find like connections between the two, even if there's no actual correlation. But just wanted to ask what your thoughts on those are, because it's like anarcho-tyranny and the deep state. Those seem to be the two two I guess major threats.
Tucker Carlson talked about them both, so we're allowed to.
Exactly. There you go. That's a good way of doing it. But so either way, wanted to end here specifically with the more of the pop culture conversation, going through these examples right here. We were back at the Empire, the Galactic Empire in Star Wars was the last one we were talking about. The Republic, not so much, with the exception of, I think you said the General Grievous thing. But that was more of a Jedi. That was more Jedi as opposed to the Republic. Yeah.
Well, the Jedi are the guardians of peace and justice in the old Republic.
So we have the Mask of the Red Death, a horrible plague that ravaged the country. Well, it's Edgar Allan Poe short story. I don't think this is a good example. He locks his fellow aristocrats in the Citadel, party every day and night, while the rest of the country suffers and dies. Until, of course, the plague shows up the party. That's not Anarcho-tyranny.
That last example is rock solid. Who wrote Victoria? I demand to know, actually.
Cultural Marxist from Victoria. Victoria, what's Victoria?
I know it as a paradox game, but
no. So I think it's talking about it looks like a book.
William Lind.
Oh, it looks like an alternate history book. But the way cultural Marxism manipulating U.S. government, make sure violent criminals go unpunished while people who stand up for them are smeared as bigots. They even end up recruiting, say, criminals into the army and letting them loose on rebels. So this is close to home.
And that's a problem. I think, in any sci-fi thing, if you were to try to write in the absurdity of the American situation, it would be so distinctly American, right? Like,
exactly.
It is, sui generis, right? It's
But I think it felt. What do you think of the? I think the Purge is probably the best example of anarcho-tyranny. Actually,
in America.
Well, yeah. And plus, wasn't the whole backstory? It was like they were doing it. It was like crime. It was just. It's purely crime control.
It's just a cover for targeted assassinations.
Oh, I thought it was just crime control, or was that like retconned or something?
Oh, I don't remember what the current thing is. I know they do kind of change it each movie.
Yeah.
But I know one of them focuses there was like a senator that it was going to be killed during the Purge, and
so I thought it was illegal. I thought it was like in that movie, at least in the first one or something. It said like government
certain category 10 weapons or whatever are forbidden, and government officials of rank blah 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 and above can't be targeted.
Yeah, so that almost seems like, yes, there would be tiers there, so it's only affecting the areas like that they want it to. So that definitely would be anarcho-tyranny. But at the same time, it's not even disguised anarcho-tyranny. It's just the government saying, hey, we're going to do anarcho-tyranny for like the next 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's like I guess it's I don't know. There's something interesting to it. It's like, what is it? The monopoly on violence spends all of its time basically destroying other challenges to its monopoly on violence, vis-a-vis anarcho-tyranny, at the realizing that by just adopting that, it can just stay in power basically ad perpetuum, without like needing to give anything to its populace whatsoever. I don't know. I'm trying my best to. I'm understanding but I'm trying my best to restate it. I think it's something kind of unique to English political economy, mostly because of I keep coming back to Paradise Lost. And the sort of the evil beat down.
If you think it's relevant, then by all means go for it.
Yeah, it's like the sort of the evil be thou my good kind of aspect of English culture that you find in any and it follows anywhere where English is spoken. It's not so much the English people or the Anglo-Saxon people, but really it's that kind of concept that follows the language. Where society kind of was governance kind of left to its own devices can kind of become a parody of itself. This is very half-baked, and I feel like every word I'm saying is being judged, so I'm going to simple steps.
No. I mean,
No,
you're very well more aware of anarcho-tyranny. I mean, of course I know anarcho-tyranny, but you guys are more well versed on it than I am. So that's why I was hoping the stream would have worked out the way in the first place. But either way, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's kind of the idea of the institutions, basically wherever England or English-speaking people have had the influence, their language has been spoken. That is a sign of also like the influence of their political, economic structures as well.
Well, yeah. The English political economy is built specifically around ensuring sovereignty is as divided as possible. It's like if you're gonna take the Schmittian approach and be like there's always sovereignty and their sovereignty needs to be concentrated, then you basically have to by design throw out the entire English political economy, because the entire English political economy, while yes it has that buck stopping at the kind of king figure, the United States replacing that with the living constitution, the whole point of the society, or rather of the whole way that the English common law expresses itself when it's practiced, is the dividing of sovereignty amongst thousands of precedents, amongst thousands of other judges, amongst and this is just the English common law aspect, but it's like, and it kind of follows down to everything else. The whole point is diffusing responsibility amongst the entire society, which is where you can get ideas as the state as really only the enforcer of contract law and nothing else.
Okay. I see. So, but then one could. I did hear somebody. I forget who I was talking about this with. It was somebody on the dissident right, but they were making an argument for how China, amidst liberalization, like internalized economic liberalization, as in to the point where China is right now.
What do you mean by liberalization? Are you just referring to the adoption of a market-based economy?
That's all I'm referring to. Yeah, I'm not saying that
in Africa it definitely does,
but that there has been, that the government has been more like I forget exactly what the argument was, but was arguing that China has in some regions engaged in anarcho-tyranny.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a really good example too, because the minorities, they can't commit violence against the Han, but the Han are kind of, a blind eye is turned to them when they commit the
what are these acts of like Han violence though? Like,
I mean, I don't know, man.
Because if it's a Chinese state, arresting Uyghurs, right, then that's tyranny. But there is, I don't think there's much of a situation.
There's through state program.
Well, let's assume there's just spontaneous violence from gangs of Han against the Uyghur that are not.
I doubt that's for there's like a billion reasons I don't think that's true. But if that were the case, it would be anarcho-tyranny. But I don't China's not the kind of place where a bunch of Han are just allowed to form social groups that do violence.
Yeah, I know that's what I don't know enough about contemporary
There's Chinese no way. I mean, first of all, who's even heard of a Han street gang?
The
triads.
I
guess something like that.
Well, that's Hong Kong specific. That's Hong Kong. Okay, maybe. What about Hong Kong? I feel like Hong Kong could.
No, that's just state tyranny. That's just the state police.
It could be right.
Real quick. The triad example, because the triads very famously worked with the CCP in the creation of the PRC, and they were kind of, they weren't really hunted down, kind of like how the Yakuza works with the Japanese government. The triads were kind of worked with the CCP, because they're not just in Hong Kong, they're throughout the entire Chinese coast. That idea brings into mind when would a good way to define anarcho-tyranny be when a government, this is going to sound really elementary, when the government starts acting like a mafia more so than a government without calling itself a mafia. where they're under no obligation to protect anyone from anything, but if you don't pay your protection money, we're going to fuck up your business.
I think that's not a terrible way of describing it. Like
Sure.
I kind of think
But
of it in
again,
that
that's kind of
context.
benign though, because there needs to be the interdiction of self-defense, right? You know, so if I'm paying, and first of all, when you pay a mafia organization protection, you actually get that protection, right? You know, if you pay a mafia organization, if you pay like, you know, any member of like the Italian mob, and he's like, I've been paying this protection for, you know, for years, and then some guy, some punk just ran in and like stuck a gun in my face and took money out, and he's like, here's what he looked like. I mean, they're gonna find that guy and take his money, right? That's you will get.
So he's never used the term specifically, but do you guys know the YouTuber Actual Justice Warrior?
No.
No? Okay, so he hold on a second. We're not gonna play anything of his, but so he's friends with Stephen Michael Davis, who's like this weird neocon libertarian hybrid that I know.
Dangerous pastime, I know.
No, but he's leagues better than Kevin Castley. I'm gonna say that. Marcel, you aware of Kevin? Oh, you'd have a field day with Kevin Castley.
You're just making these names up in the lab at this point.
Do you know Justin Freibush?
Nope.
Do you know Brent Quisenberry?
You're just making these names up. Like,
No, I'm not. I'm literally not making.
This is like that. This is like that list where it's like, you know, American names from that Japanese baseball game where it's like Sleeve McDykel, Buff McStriff. You're just making up names.
Either way, so I'm gonna share the screen here just so you see. I mean, it's the names of some of his video. Like you might get the basic rundown. So, for instance, squatters destroy Hollywood mansion. Minnesota Police Department quits. This guy's entire channel is basically about anarcho-tyranny. Like, do you guys remember Banco? Do you guys remember Banco Brown?
I really like how your top subscriptions are Penguin Zero, Veggie Tales Official, and Vatican News.
Hold on a second. Yeah, Banco Brown shooting, San Francisco. Like, I don't know if Banco Brown.
Oh, I know this one. Yeah. The
Banco Brown.
Yeah.
Who names their child Banco Brown? Like, I'm sorry, that name just. makes me
Banco
laugh.
Brown was not their government name.
Is this Banco?
Yes.
Is Banco Brown a man or a woman? Oh, there we go. The security guard who fatally shot Banco Brown, transgender man suspected of shoplifting from a San Francisco Walgreens in April, must pay $1,500.
That was wild too. That shooting, if you've seen the video of it, he like followed, like he like fought Banco Brown in the store, kicked the shit out of him, and then like let them go, and then like follow them, and then Banco Brown, like you know how certain people can be, you know, they lose a fight and they can't help but say like one last parting words, and then that made security guards like, oh, word, and followed him out the door, pulled the gun out of his ankle, I believe, and then just shot him in the back.
Oh,
so that actually was not a clean. That was not a clean. I mean, you know, whatever, but that was not a clean kill.
Fair enough. I mean, but still, no. But there are like laws now where, and this is what I was saying earlier. I mean, anarcho-tyranny is like basically when the government will restrict, will make it illegal to enter a private business without wearing a mask. Yet, if that business burns down, like they're not allowed to defend themselves.
We're back to COVID. Yeah.
I mean, I think that is.
Yeah, it's close enough.
And I know we've discussed this on the channel before, not in any panels where you guys were on, but when we were talking about January 6th, about how January 6th is played up to be like the worst thing ever compared to the riots in the summer of 2020, which those harmed private businesses. Those are businesses that are never going to recover. The January 6th insurrection, whatever you want to call it, there was minimal damage done to, there was just a little minimal damage done to public property that immediately is going to be fixed and repaired. Like, I mean, that's how you quantify whether or not it's worth, like who was actually harmed. I mean, you could make some abstract argument like, oh yes, but it symbolically destroyed the fabric of our country. But it's like, no, but it didn't affect normal, regular people, the January 6th thing. Like, I mean, I don't know, that part's just outrage when people were treating that worse than the Milwaukee riots and the Kenosha riots, when all these people were losing their business. Because the government refused to intervene. And I guess we can come back again to, is it because of incompetence, or is it completely deliberate? Because you might argue in the case of like a local police force that it might just be incompetence, but that there already might be measures in place on a more top-down level that are disincentivizing them from actually doing their job.
Well, I mean, I think something like anarcho-tyranny can only really exist in a world where violence has such a high barrier of entry. There's such a high barrier of entry to challenge the monopoly on violence that that's part of it. That no one can really set up like an alternative. I don't want to say an alternative government, but like basically like an authority structure where the government has little to no authority, because then they get Waco'd. But another part of me feels like that the fact that the federal government has essentially had infinite money for the past however many years that they can funnel to whatever causes, state, local, and we've established that the federal government is basically under the control of totally avowed communists. So they can funnel it for their new left culture comp that they've been fighting since, before I mean, honestly, since like 1898, if you want to go back that far. I don't believe in the Puritan thesis, but I don't know. I think it's a unique thing that can exist in the current moment where you can't really any sort of these, like, we all see what the solution is, or at least like what the means of at least changing the status quo from anarcho-tyranny into total anarchy, which is, I think, the only place it can go. Is like the sort of, the Mannerbuns, or the whatever you want to talk about, is the way of sliding it from anarcho-tyranny to tyranny when there is no monopoly on violence. Violence is a very low cost of entry economy. But we live in such a time where the circumstances favor the federal government maintaining its monopoly on violence, and this stance it takes. I don't know. That's kind of me spitballing, but I throw that out to you gentlemen for consideration.
That's fair. Either way, so we're gonna start wrapping up here.
Sure.
In a second, but I want to go another 5-10 minutes or so. But I did want to touch on just the just end with a fun conversation, specifically on the popular culture aspects. What are your guys' favorite examples of anarcho-tyranny, or something similar to anarcho-tyranny? It doesn't necessarily have to fit the strict definition in recent popular culture.
Like I said, it's tough to think of any clear examples of popular culture because all examples are pretty. It's a pretty distinctly American phenomenon. Although maybe you could see examples of it in like the Bolshevik Revolution, which should maybe give a hint as to how it became an American phenomenon.
This may be a stupid example real quick, but it just came to mind. In Space Jam, when Michael Jordan, when the bad ending is described to him is he's in chains, and he's forced to play games against people who are like given the ladder up to the hoop, and he'll lose forever and ever and ever. Is that anarcho-tyranny? I know it's a stupid example, but it just came into my mind.
Haven't seen it.
I actually haven't seen Space Jam in many years. I feel like a good example of anarcho-tyranny would be if the government locked us up to a couch and made us watch. No, that would just be tyranny. Made us watch the second one on loop or something. No, but was that you, Marcel, earlier, given the Samurai Jack? The Samurai Jack.
Yeah. It's pretty close enough.
Is this the one you were reading?
Yeah, if you show that you're too good at fighting off the bandits that roam the countryside, Aku will send robots after you.
That's fair. And then we have, what else do we have on here? Batman Arkham City, video games, films, live action. Demolition Man, though, that is the classic example, though. But Escape from New York and Escape from LA.
I just noticed something. You don't have an ad block. What's going on there?
I do. It doesn't work for my Chrome for some reason. It's strange. It doesn't work on my Chrome. It only works on Internet Explorer.
Hey, you know what? Here's an anarcho-tyranny. Google and YouTube like punishing you for using ad block, but doing nothing to stop people from advertising like obvious malware and crypto scams on the thing. That's anarcho-tyranny, right? Because it's not that Google is giving you malware; they're allowing people to distribute malware, right? Meanwhile, if you try to protect yourself from it by like using ad block, then they punish you by like throwing up all these things. So yeah, and it's clear that Google could stop it, because if I said, "Hey, listen, I want to take out an ad on Google," you know, and your advertisement is, let's say, a certain kind of pro-MAGA stuff, you know, Google could stop you, right? If I said, like, "Hey, I'm gonna link you to like." If I distributed malware that like gave money to the Donald Trump campaign, you know, like it just skimmed off your money and did that, you know, Google will be like, "Whoa, we got to stop that." But if I distribute malware that like holds your shit ransom, you know, Google can't stop that. You know what's going on there, right? There you go.
Another okay. What about this? You have Walt Disney with Lucasfilm. Like Walt Disney has not fired Kathleen Kennedy when she is clearly the main problem with Lucasfilm right now. Like she's holding the back.
I see you're also like an Overlord DVD enjoyer.
What? I rarely watch Doomcock, but is this
See, you notice how I like specifically called him Overlord DVD, and you chose to call him Doomcock.
I thought everyone could just call him Doomcock. I thought Overlord DVD was the name of the channel, and Doomcock.
Yeah, I refused to refer to him as.
No, but
he like just disrupts like earnings calls at Disney to prove like Kathleen Kennedy is getting fired. I remember the very first time I heard about it, it tickled the same part of my brain that like the first time I heard about Q, where it's like, wow, Dave Filoni is gonna make the sequel trilogy non-canon by having Ahsoka enter the Force Time Nexus thing and stab Palpatine when he comes through the window after.
No. That's Mike Zero. You're starting like Mike Zero now.
Oh, okay, whatever it was. Well,
no,
listen,
Mike Zero is the guy who just makes up stuff, and yet he still gets clicked.
I was just sure. Listen, no, I heard that from Doomcock Spies because he's the only person I ever listened to on that. I trusted the plan.
They're purposefully not firing Kathleen Kennedy, and Kathleen Kennedy is terrorizing the Star Wars fans for approving shit. And I don't know, something's going on. Like, okay, on that note,
I heard some wild theories like, oh, Kathleen Kennedy is like afraid. They're like, Kathleen Kennedy is doing this so that she doesn't get called racist. Like, call racist by who?
Yeah, who's gonna call Kathleen Kennedy racist?
Like, who's the power behind the throne on Kathleen Kennedy? Like, you never get like the theory of politics here. Sometimes it's like, okay, Kathleen Kennedy is like the Kushner to Disney's Donald Trump, where like Donald Trump keeps Jared Kushner around so that every time he does something bad, everybody's like, oh, fire Jared Kushner, and they just won't do it. And then you're like, and everything just gets blamed on him. I don't see how on earth you see a repeated policy of Disney like turning out shit Star Wars content, and you're like, I mean, Kathleen Kennedy isn't in charge of Marvel, and Marvel is crap. How did that happen?
But the thing is, Marvel was good up until like 2 years ago. Allegedly. I mean, I've never been the biggest. I mean, I like Marvel. It's fine, but like, I mean, I'm not like a huge hardcore Marvel fan. But I mean, the with the exception of a few things here and there, the Star Wars sequel stuff, the new canon stuff, has not been particularly good. Whereas there wasn't until the end of Phase 3, Marvel was consistently like decent.
I guess.
I mean, we're getting a little off topic there, but again, I think we'll just go ahead.
You brought it up, all right.
Go ahead and wrap it up here. Again, the stream did not go exactly as I would have wanted to for various reasons that incapacitated two of our other scheduled guests this evening, but I will have them on at another time. Thank you for coming on, Marcel, and staying the whole time despite the little bit of chaos back there in the beginning. And Thank you, Mr. Paul Fahrenheit, for coming on last minute and providing your insight here.
Yeah, sorry, it was last minute and half-assed like it usually is.
Oh no, it's not usually half-assed with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
No, but either way, do you guys have anything you want to go ahead and shill? Book recommendations or just any final thoughts on the discussion tonight?
Sure. Book recommendations are Days of Rage by Brian Burra and Always with Honor by Peter Rangel. Days of Rage is about recent American incidents. Always with Honor is about the Bolshevik Revolution. And then when it comes to and then if you just want to read Sam Francis, you should read Beautiful Losers. I guess a book that no, that's not really related. Yeah, so Beautiful Losers, Days of Rage, Always with Honor, and you know what? Let's do Living the Dream by Jack McCracken. And
that's a name, Jack McCracken.
Yeah, and In Defense of Flogging by Peter Moskos. That's another good one.
In Defense of Stoning by Gary North. What if Gary North was just talking about getting stoned the whole time?
Something like that.
Who's talking about drugs?
Yeah. Let's see what else. Yeah, that's all I have for books. Besides that, follow me on Twitter. I am on Twitter at Anarchy in Black. But I'm pretty sure if you're watching this stream, you already know who I am.
They already know. This is where all the viewers came from tonight.
All right. And then besides that, subscribe to my Substack. I'm writing an article series over the next few weeks on a very contrived top-down push to make the right wing do psychedelics. So
you were telling me this the other day at board game day. So all right, and you, Mr. Fahrenheit.
I mean, if you haven't already purchased my collection of short stories called A Country Squire's Notebook, they're all set in my American mythos, but they're mostly going into the mythology of Virginia, set in different parts of it. That you can find that on my Gumroad, which if you Google Paul Fahrenheit, it's going to be like the second thing that comes up. Other than that, subscribe to the Old Glory Club, support the Old Glory Club, look for any sort of local Old Glory Club chapters. We are always accepting new applications for new people, attempting to rebuild civil society one group of Anons at a time. So please like, support, assist the Old Glory Club, anything like that. That's pretty much all I got.
As somebody who is getting ready to start a chapter himself, still looking for a few members, I also endorse that as well very much. Also, everybody, please be sure to like and subscribe to me. Click the bell because I hear that does something as well. I also just started a Subscribe Star finally. The link should be in the show notes below. Finally got around to that. Thanks to Yiz the Unix insistence. But either way, thank you for the two of you for coming on this evening. Sorry it didn't work out exactly the way I would have hoped, but either way, and thank you so much to the audience who stuck around or who came in at a later time or who are going to be watching this pre-recorded. So thank you again, everybody. And I will like to have you guys back on again sometime, a different stream, whether together or alone or whatever. But
sorry, I just noticed an audience question that I might as well answer. It says, do you guys consider any selective enforcement of rules and laws to be anarcho-tyranny? No. It needs to involve like an interaction between citizens. So if it happens to be the case that like drug laws are enforced, but the president's son is allowed to do cocaine, then that's just selective enforcement. That's not anarcho-tyranny, right? Because it's not as though Joe Biden doing cocaine, not to get to it's like, oh, it's a victim's crime or whatever, but like Joe Biden or Hunter Biden doing cocaine does not like infringe, if we have a rule against jaywalking, or a rule against like parking in handicap spots, but like the president's son is allowed to park in handicap spots, that's like a problem. That's selective enforcement, but that's not like anarcho-tyranny. It's not that, normal citizens are like denied the protection of law enforcement and legal services, unless it's to the point where like
I would say that can be an aspect of it, though. Like especially like enforcing gun laws, for example, enforcing gun laws for self-defense if you're getting robbed by somebody, particularly.
Well, yeah, because now we're being denied the protection of law.
Yes, no, but not prosecuting somebody who like robs a store at gunpoint.
Yeah,
that would be anarcho-tyranny, I'd say.
Yes, correct. Not prosecuting someone who robs a store is denying their victim the protection of law, right?
Yeah.
But not prosecuting someone who does cocaine because their dad is like the president. That's not denying some other person the protection of law, except I guess to the extent that doing drugs makes you commit other crimes.
Yeah. Well, either way, on that note, thank you again, everybody who watched, and thank you for you guys for coming on this evening. Again, please subscribe to them, follow them on Twitter, follow me on Twitter, and have a wonderful evening.